We have a very good episode on our hands today because we're looking at the mysteries of the ancient world. Privyet, my fellow Kiwistanis, and welcome to all visitors to the official YouTube channel of the Kingdom of Kiwistan. My name is President Pablo, and in this video we're looking at ancient world mysteries, ranging from the powerful war machines of Archimedes to lost cities and even entire kingdoms. But before we get into that, with some quick words of wisdom from the Tsar of Kiwistan, Jaffa the Great. Those were some very wise words from Tsar Jaffa, and now without further ado, let's dive down this iceberg together. Where is Shambhala? In Tibetan Buddhism, Shambhala is mentioned in the Kalashakra Tantra, which is a series of sacred texts, referring to it as a hidden kingdom located somewhere beyond the Himalayas. It is prophesied in the Kalashakra Tantra that when the world declines into war and greed, Maitreya, who is the next Buddha, will emerge from Shambhala in command of a powerful army to defeat the forces of evil and usher in a golden age for humanity. Many Buddhist scholars today say Shambhala is symbolic of a perfect world, or can only be accessed through spiritual enlightenment since it exists in a higher dimension, and it's not an actual physical place. But there are some who say Shambhala was actually referring to a real physical place that's just waiting somewhere out there to be discovered. There have been a few expeditions to find Shambhala over the ages, but so far none of them have been successful. However, there was one expedition in the 1920s by Nicholas and Helena Roerisch, who, despite being from Russia, were greatly interested in Eastern mysticism. They both fled Russia after the Communist Revolution and wound up in the United States of America, where they became fascinated with finding the lost kingdom of Shambhala, which they believed contained a secret society of sorts which guided human evolution from behind the scenes. So sort of like, I don't know, giving us fire and the steam engine and stuff like that. During the long and treacherous expedition, 5 of their fellow explorers died, and they claimed to have seen a flying metal object. There was one point where they went missing for months, and when they returned, they said they had not found Shambhala. However, some say during the period where they went months without contact, they had entered Shambhala and agreed to keep it a secret from the outside world. So, whatever your thoughts on this are, to this day, the location or existence of Shambhala remains an enigma to the entire world. So I know you're probably thinking because it's called the City of the Caesars is something to do with ancient Rome, but it's actually located in South America. It was supposedly located in the Andes, somewhere between what is now Argentina and Chile, leading many European explorers to search for it. According to legend, it was said to be rich in gold, silver, and diamonds, and supposedly built by survivors of Spanish shipwrecks or the rumoured Patagonian giants. Now, I know giants sound extremely far-fetched, but when Spanish explorers first arrived in what is now southern Argentina, they reported encountering natives who stood twice as tall as them and even interacted with them. The great English explorer, Sir Francis Drake's chaplain, that's sort of like a priest or something for those who aren't Christian, wrote about encountering people who were 7.5 feet tall back in 1579, and decades later, Dutch sailors also said they encountered them. However, centuries later, when European explorers returned, the giants were nowhere to be found. Now, personally, I think they might have unfortunately been wiped out by diseases introduced by the European explorers, and inadvertently causing their extinction. But anyway, the City of the Caesars remains lost to this day, and some historians say the story may have come from indigenous people describing the Incan Empire, which was rich in gold. A slim chance a jihadist is watching this. Discussing this is probably going to run up Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So if they end up pulling a Charlie Hebdo on me, I'm going to need you to avenge Kiwistan. But anyway, there are some historians who argue that the current city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia isn't the original location of the Islamic holy city of Mecca. Supporters of this theory say early Islamic text describes agriculture, vineyards, and grassland, which doesn't exactly match with Mecca's remote desert location, and it also mentions that closer contact with the Byzantine Empire, which is in Greece and occupied Constantinople, implying that it was actually further north as opposed to in Saudi Arabia. Documentary maker Dan Gibson proposed that the actual location of Mecca is Petra in Jordan, as some early mosque faced in the direction of it, as opposed to the current Mecca in Saudi Arabia. As you can imagine, this is fiercely disputed by other historians and Islamic scholars, as no Islamic source from any time period places Mecca anywhere other than where it is today. But anyway, I think this is a pretty interesting theory, but again, Islamic scholars would very, very much dispute this, and they probably know more about it than me, so there you go. In 1958, Mawson Smith, who was an ancient history professor, discovered a previously unknown letter while visiting an Orthodox monastery in Israel. It was written by Clement of Alexandria, who was a Christian philosopher in the 3rd century. In the letter, he describes that there is a secret version of the Gospel of Mark used for advanced Christian teaching, in which it describes Jesus raising a young man from the dead. Now, if you're not a Christian, it's important to understand that the Bible was created a couple of hundred years after the ascension of Jesus and was compiled out of different manuscripts and texts written over the centuries. So it is entirely possible that some texts may have been left out or lost to time, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were discovered a couple of decades ago. But yeah, I think it's an interesting theory. If you want to look into it, you can Google it. When I was around 8, learning about this guy from Horrible Histories was part of what made me so interested in ancient Greece today. Archimedes was an ancient Greek inventor alive in the 3rd century BC who lived in the city of Syracuse. During the Second Punic Wars between Carthage and Rome, which was sort of like the ancient version of World War II, of the ancient world, the city sided with Carthage and was besieged by the Roman army. For 2 years, the city of Syracuse was able to hold the invaders off thanks to machines invented by Archimedes. These included the ship shaker, which was positioned along the city walls and used a grappling hook or large claw to grab Roman ships, lift them up out of the water, and throw them down, sinking them. Giant catapults, which were able to easily adjust their aim, capable of throwing huge rocks to obliterate siege weapons, and metal bolts which were extremely accurate. The most famous weapon of them all were his mirrors, which were able to redirect the rays of the sun to see enemy ships of fire, kind of like an ancient version of an energy beam or that new laser the Royal Navy and the American Navy are developing. According to historians, in ancient Rome he had a bunch of bronze mirrors on the walls which he used together to form a combined heat ray which was hot enough to set them ablaze. However, this is not mentioned by the most renowned historian of the time, Plutarch, who merely said he had machines capable of setting enemy ships on fire. In the modern day, researchers have attempted to recreate this weapon, including the Mythbusters, which is a great show, I highly recommend it, which ended up achieving mixed results. Unfortunately, Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier when the city fell, and some of his works have now been lost to time. Now, personally, I think the mirrors were real, but they were used to blind Roman soldiers on their ships and make it uncomfortable for them so they were not able to fight properly or couldn't see the defenders firing stuff at them, as opposed to being built with the intention of seeing ships on fire. So, imagine a Roman soldier, all of a sudden, you can't see anything, you're completely blinded, my eyes, it's really hot, and that allowed the defenders to then, fire catapults and sink them. Probably already heard about this one. I mean, it wasn't a Pirates of the Caribbean movie after all. Basically, there's a spring somewhere where if you drink it, you can remain young forever, and it is a common myth throughout multiple cultures spanning the centuries. Now, of course, this has led some people, conspiracy theorists, to say it's a similar situation to the recurring Great Flood myth, and it's all referring to one place that actually exists. But to me, it really reflects the human desire to have a do-over, with the knowledge they know now and how they wouldn't take it for granted this time. It reminds me of the song Time by Pink Floyd. You are young and life is long, and there is time to kill today. And then one day you find 10 years have got behind you. No one told you when to run, you missed the starting gun. We all think that we have more time, which is true, but at the same time, if you always act like you have more time, you will waste your life waiting for it to start. So for example, if you want to be a professional football player in the future, then you have to act like it now, because the future is not a place you can visit. It is just a dream of the present. We can only exist in the now. Now, I used to know some people back in high school who would only live for the weekends, so they could get drunk and high, and that's not a way to live. You can't spend your life working a dead-end job waiting for the weekend. No matter what, do not spend your only mortal life sleepwalking through the days, waiting for tomorrow so you can do it all over again. Make sure to tell your parents that you love them, go on an adventure, and do what you want to do with your life. And not anyone else unless it's like illegal or something like that. As I know from experience, regret is one of the worst pains you can feel, and there is no cure for it. You do not want to reach 70 and look back realising you wasted your life, and spend the rest of your days being consumed by bitterness and resentments. That's how grumpy old people are created. So to all my fellow Kiwistanis, as your president, I encourage you all to live a life that you want, and one that you can look back on and be proud of. You know, you can tell your grandkids all the cool stories you did. Because you're the only person in charge of your life. You can't wait for something to happen. You have to act like it now. And don't be so caught in the past either. It doesn't exist. It's just a dream that can only exist in the present. You can only exist in the present. Do not be like... The ending of 2001 Space Odyssey is kind of like a metaphor, you know, where he's in like the dimension. If you haven't seen it, I highly encourage you to watch it. But he sees himself as an old man. Then he's an old man. He sees himself on his deathbed. It cuts on his deathbed. Because we spend our whole life looking forward to this thing's going to happen in the future, and all of a sudden you're at the future. But as I remember, a couple of weeks ago, I was driving along, and there was a bus, and the kids were playing sweet and sour. So if you wave, and the person in the car waves back, then they're sweet. If they don't wave back, it's sour. So you have to get like more sweets than you get sour to win the game. And I remember playing that on the bus, and all of a sudden I'm one of the car behind the bus. And that, to me, as a kid to me, being an adult was like years and years. That was like 100 years in the future, and all of a sudden I'm an adult. So you have to exist in the now. You can't wait for life to start. But yeah, I'm rambling. Let's move on to the next topic. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Long live Kiwistan!